Hello, welcome to the Beyond Dollar Signs podcast with your host, Mark Taylan. Mark, this is episode number 1, the inaugural, the launch, if you will. Nice to be with you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No. This is your podcast, and I'm looking forward in this podcast, in this episode, to get a better sense of who you are and to sort of serve as a reference point for people if they're listening to episode 56 thinking, I want to know more about Mark, I'll go back to listen to episode 1. And that's what they'll be able to do. So we'll get a little origin story, if you will, as it's often called. And I'm going to start with a really simple question, which is, you're a financial planner. What in the world led you to make the decision to get into this particular line of business and work?
You know, that's a great question. And I've thought about that for many years. I really would like to share my beginnings, and I think that will explain really my journey into becoming a financial advisor, a financial planner. And I think once you see that, you kind of see, what that process has been like for me. So, I grew up as an only child. I was the only child, the only grandchild, the only nephew for 9 years of my life. And so I find that I was raised with adult conversations, adult expectations. So it really instilled in me, just a different mindset. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a lot of cousins. I had a cousin that was not very close, so I didn't have a lot of interaction. So I spent a lot of time with grandparents and my aunts and uncles and my parents. My dad was the oldest of 6 children, as was my mom was a middle child of 6 children. So big families. But I spent a lot of time with them. So, at an early age, I had those type of interactions. And so, I find myself very comfortable at an early age talking with adults, right? Because that's who I was interacting with.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So, fast forward, I grew up in the 70s. So to give a point of reference, the 70s, we didn't have social media. We didn't have video games yet, right? Not till the end of the 70s. Yeah. So it was board games, conversation, and food. That was my upbringing, right? And so,
well, you could have grown up in the South, because I grew up with board games, conversation, and food all over the place.
Wonderful.
when I was growing up, yeah.
Oh, I love it. So, fast forward to 1993. I'm 23 years old. I have a young family already. I've got a 4-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter already. My son Ryan and my daughter Serena at 2. My wife and I started early, but, because of my upbringing, I was pretty mature. Right? I grew up very quickly. So I was very mature at that age. And so I was already thinking about, what happens to me what happens to my family if something happens to me, right? So at an early age, I had experience introduced to a life insurance representative, and he talked just about that subject, what happens if something happens to you? Yeah. And I remember getting my first life insurance policy, $100,000 at that time seemed like a lot of money. It's not much today, but back then it was a lot of money. And I remember it being $19 a month. It was a 30-year policy, but I had that peace of mind. I remember having that peace of mind, knowing that at least if something happened to me, my family would have some money and be taken care of.
Yeah.
So in 93 is when I really started my financial services career. I went to work for a bank. I was a bank employee. I learned, how to be a teller. And back then it was, if you remember, they had the passbook savings. Nowadays, nobody would remember.
I was going to say, man, nobody has a clue. If anybody listening to this probably is like, what?
Exactly, right? It looked like just to describe it for the viewers that don't know, it looks like a passport, right? And you would come in, make your deposit, and you would put it in the machine, and it would print the deposit or withdrawal in the amount. So yeah, those were the times, right? And I started as I worked in the bank, I moved from position to position, and eventually I became a new accounts rep, and I was helping clients with opening bank accounts, CD, simple financial products, right? And again, people that would walk in, I was in Monterey, California, so a retirement city, I would say. And so a lot of older clientele. And to me, they were like my grandparents walking in very, with a lot of stories. And so often I would sit there and we'd talk for 30, 45 minutes before we get to business. And it just felt natural to me. But in that process, I started to realize like, there's got to be more than just this, right? And I remember meeting with a client one day, Mrs. Thompson, and she came in, had a CD to roll over, and I'm looking at the rate sheet and, talking about how she's been and how's her dog, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And as she left, the financial advisor came to me afterwards and said, there's a lot of other options besides what the bank offers. And that was my first introduction to financial advising, right? I had no clue, right? No clue that there was a whole nother world of that. And I think that really, for me, I love to learn. I want to do the best for clients and know that I'm, have all the, giving them the most comprehensive advice possible. And at that age, and, I'm 23 and it's 1993. And, I just was looking for direction, but I really knew that I loved working with people and I wanted to be in that profession.
Yeah, that's interesting. Was this a financial planner associated with the bank, or was this just a client or somebody that you ran into, or?
Yeah, it was a financial advisor. She had just graduated from USC. I remember her because she had her USC plaque, and she was talking a different language to me. I mean, it was a completely different language that she was talking, and I had no clue at that time. With a young family in the 90s, you're just trying to survive. You're not thinking about financial planning. You really don't even know what it is. And I'm quite shocked in these days when people still ask, what is a financial advisor and what do they do? It always shocks me. It's like, really? I don't know, Mark. I mean, I think there are a lot of people. I think there are a lot of people who don't know, who are, and maybe if they do know, they're wary because they're like, who is this person and what do they do? So I think it's different because it's, 2025, not 1993. But I think that there are a lot of people who either don't know or look askance at financial advisors and financial planners. I agree. I see that more and more these days. And I think about, financial planning is more successful the earlier you start, right? The earlier you start in your life, right? And, I think it's an opportunity lost. The older you get, the later you plan, you miss on the opportunity of time, right? And I think that's important. So anyway, I was as I was saying, in 93, I had my first experience with a financial advisor, and that really set me on the path to learn the field, to get into the business. And at the time, I didn't have my degree yet. And so for the next 8 years, I put myself through school and really just grinded it out until I got fully licensed. I worked on a team. And then by the early 2000s, 2001, I was a financial advisor. I've had all my licenses. I worked with a team, and that's really what started my career. Right? Is early on, I just this is what I wanted to do, and I actually went to school. I always believe in hedging your bets a little bit. What if that doesn't work out, right?
Yeah.
So I studied computer science and economics in college, right? And so I thought, I'm in Silicon Valley. If that doesn't work out, I can be an engineer. I could be a computer programmer. I got to get something for going to school because I tell you what, it's not easy going to school with a family, right? I had young children.
No, I know. I'm impressed that you did that. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I'm very proud of that. And, my wife, Joy, she did the same. She followed me, and we both, got our degrees together. She's been in banking. So, this journey hasn't been alone. It's been with her as well.
That's great. Is she a part of the practice now?
She is. She kind of oversees, and she's like my rock. She keeps, I come back and I run ideas off her, and she's like the biggest support.
You mentioned you have all the licenses and stuff. What kind of, what are those licenses? What do you have?
Yeah. So, I started out, and when you start out at the big wirehouses, the first license you get is your Series 7, right? Then you get your 65, which is, allows you to be an investment advisor. Mm-hmm. I got my insurance license in 2002. And like I said, I'm a student of the game, and, I want to know about everything, right? So 2006, I got my California real estate broker's license. 2017, I got my NMLS license. So, really for me, I really want to understand the challenges people have and the experience that they go through when making financial decisions. So in order to understand that, you have to do a little bit of homework and study and get the licenses. So that way, you can give really objective advice. Right. And so, I'm proud to be able to offer advice, not just on one area, but kind of looking at things, holistically.
Obviously, if you have a real estate license, you can sit down with somebody and talk about them in a complete, full, well-rounded way.
Yeah, I think of it as languages, right? If you think about it, I speak that language. I know what loan officers and real estate agents think, right? I know what financial advisors think. And so I think when I ever engage somebody, and if they come to me from a standpoint of a mortgage transaction or a real estate transaction, in my mind, I'm looking at it as a financial advisor. It's like, what's the big picture?
Yeah.
What's the motivation for this piece of real estate? Is it your primary residence? Is it investment property? What is the objective? What are your long-term plans? And so I can't help it. I look at things through that lens because I really want to know. Tell me about the structure of the debt that you're going to acquire. Are you a business? Let's take a look at your balance sheet. So I've studied taxes, and, I really want to give that advice. And it's funny. My son always says to me, he goes, "Dad, you give them too much advice. You give them too much. If they come to you and you're asking questions about mortgages or how to qualify, you give them the whole financial advisor, experience." And I said, I can't help it because, I believe that, proper planning, you have to look at all the options and make an informed decision, right? And not that decision just doesn't affect you today, it affects you in the future. I mean,
Sure.
You're buying a house and it's a 30-year mortgage, right? And what is your job situation? What are your reserves? What happens if you lose your job? Those kind of things are so important to discuss, right? And I take it as a responsibility, right? It's a responsibility to educate whoever's in front of me, whatever walk of life they come from. I take it very, very seriously to advise them the best I can.
It sounds like the kind of clients that you like to work with, Mark, are younger clients, people just getting started out, or is that sort of your sweet spot, or what is your ideal client?
Yeah, that's a great question. Not really. I would say that, I've been practicing for over 23, 24 years now,
Yeah.
right? And clients that I typically engage with are closer to retirement. They're that 55 to 65 spot, right? Age-wise. Either they're planning to retire, they're 5 years away, or they're getting close. So they have to really bridge the gap from working to retiring, and you have to answer questions of, what does retirement look like? What is your expectation? What kind of lifestyle do you want to continue your current lifestyle? I mean, those are the clients that I've worked with from the very beginning. And I must say, that's been very gratifying to me. One of the things that I think about a lot is, when I started in the business, I was in my early 30s, and people would look at me and think, "Did you just get out of college? You want us to trust you with our hard work and our life savings, and you look like you just got out of school." And I realized right away that, people make when they see you, they make a decision pretty fast, right?
They do. Yes, we do that.
And so one of the things that I and I still do this. I had to do this. I don't think I have to do it as much anymore because I'm older now, right? But
yeah, but you still look like you're 12. Okay, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. One of the big things is I had children early. My first two children, I had, at 23, I had a 4 and a 2-year-old, right? And so by the time I was in my 30s, my kids were teenagers, right? They were they were much older. So imagine the people that I was engaging with, they had kids my kids' age.
Right.
So I could relate in that sense to having children and the growing pains and the challenges that they go through, right? And so I think that was a common thing is that, hey, he understands our pain, right? He understands because he has children of his own, right? And fast forward, now I've got a 9-year-old grandson. Guess what? The clients that I met with, they have grandchildren too. So that relatability still remains. Yes.
That's really amazing. That's so crazy. Wow. Well, this kind of goes to, I'm curious because part of the purpose of this first episode is to get to know you personally. So let me just ask you a little bit about that in terms of your practice and your personal life. Tell me a little bit about you. I've got a sense of you, but how do you balance your family and your work life, if you will?
I think that what I try to do is, when you're young and when I was going to school and learning the business, there wasn't any time, right? But I think it's so important to find balance. If you know me, I'm very strict about, what I eat, exercise, my habits, right?
Yeah.
There's this book called Atomic Habits that I read recently. I read part of it recently, and I try to maximize my time, right? If I'm walking on the treadmill, I'm listening to a podcast or I'm watching something informational, right?
Yeah.
And so I try to maximize my time, and I think it's really important. Everything revolves around family. If I have a business trip, and I'm going to, let's say, New York or Miami, I usually spend a couple of days and take the family. I take my youngest daughter, my wife, and we go and spend time and enjoy that. And so we make business trips, family trips, and make it fun.
That's great.
So, and family really is at the heart of it, right? I have 3 children and a grandson. It's weekend barbecues. We have common things that we like. We love, of course, going to things like the movies. An interesting fact is, my family has all trained martial arts.
Which one?
So it's a mixed martial arts. So my wife and myself and my daughter are all black belts in Taekwondo and in mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
And we've trained together. My older 2 children, we did judo together when they were younger. So I've trained it my whole life, and it's still a passion of mine. I mean, I'm in my 50s, and I just started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu about a year ago.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
I'm getting beat up there, but it's a great group of guys. They're all older. Sometimes I have to remind a few guys that, hey, I'm old enough to be your dad, just when they're giving it to me pretty hard, right, on the mat. So take it easy, And I say to them, how old is your dad? And they go, oh, I'm this old. Okay. They go, what? But, I'll pull that card when I need to.
And then they beat you up anyway. I mean, come on.
Yeah, they beat me up anyways. That's okay. And I come home and my wife is like, why do you do this to yourself? So.
Well, why do you do it? I mean, is it the challenge? It's just, I could give a lot of reasons why I would enjoy martial arts and have enjoyed martial arts in my life. I'm just kind of curious for just one detour for a moment. Why do you continue to do it? What is it that it gives you satisfaction or keeps bringing you back?
I just love it, right? I love the challenge of improving and learning different arts. It's not only, it's a mental challenge and physical challenge, right? And I've done martial arts the same kind of path. I did 93 was the first time I started in karate, right? And as a kid, I grew up watching kung fu movies, right? Where the guy's talking and the voice doesn't match.
I've never seen Bruce Lee. Come on, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on.
Yeah. So I've always loved martial arts. I grew up watching, all the Jean-Claude Van Damme and all the martial artists along the way. And, it's just a journey. I love it. It ties into where I want to be health-wise. It keeps me motivated and gives me purpose. I used to play in basketball leagues, and it was great because my son and I got to play together. But I've been fortunate. I know I've never had a major injury, and thank goodness. And so, I figured it's a good time to retire from that and just continue martial arts at my pace. Yeah.
No, that is great. That is fantastic. Well, we're about out of time on this first episode. So why don't we conclude it by just give us a sense or an idea of who do you think should be listening to this podcast, and who's your audience that you want to reach out to?
Really, I'm hoping to reach a broad audience, right? And my practice tends to be real focused towards early retirement, late retirement into the end, right? So multi-generational, that tends to be my audience. But, I just want to be able to share the knowledge that I have. I wish I would have started earlier, right? A lot of people do financial planning and getting exposed to, these kind of things that really can position you for a better retirement and provide, financial security for your family. So, I really want to reach a broad audience with these podcasts, and it really is maybe for a younger demographic. I hope I can reach to get them started early. Many of my clients, some of them I've walked to the end, so they're in their 90s. My oldest client is 102, believe it or not. 102
get out of
years
here.
old. Yes. Wonderful lady, right? But
she practices Brazilian jiu-jitsu too, right?
She probably does. Yeah. And my youngest client is actually, I tell you what, my youngest client is 31 years old now, right? And so a lot of times now it's not only the parents that I work with, but their children and their children, right? So it's that multi-generational people that I work with. And I think the knowledge and experience I have can help really a younger demographic to the older demographic, right? And what I hope for this podcast is, to share my experience, to know that, hey, I've been in the trenches and I've grinded it out to get to, to reach my objectives. And I've experienced a lot along the way. And I think there's a lot that I can add, that I can help people with and advise them. I can't help everybody, and I don't obviously have the time to meet with everybody on an individual basis. But I hope this podcast will be a great, reference point and will help them in some way.
That's fantastic. So if anybody's listening to this podcast and they're thinking, that sounds kind of interesting, I would like to reach out to them, what's the best way to get a hold of you, Mark? How do they reach out? My website is
advisors360pwm.com. I'm located in Silicon Valley, a town called Morgan Hill, California. They could reach out to me by email, by phone. We'll put that in the contact. So it'll be in the show notes. If you're curious about any further contact details, just don't worry about it. Look in the show notes. It'll be there for you. I'll tell you, if you're listening to this podcast and you are not a subscriber, and chances are, if you're listening to the first podcast, you're not, become one. That's easy. All you have to do is reach out and hit the follow button. That's the beauty. Because when you're a subscriber, you don't have to worry about when does Mark put these things out or where does he put them out? None of that. You're notified, and you can give the episode a listen. The other thing that I would ask as well is that if you like the podcast, you find it interesting, you find it helpful and useful, share it with people. Please, word of mouth promotion is really an effective tool, and we would very, very much appreciate it. So until next time, also known as episode number 2, I'm Bill Tucker. On behalf of Mark and everybody at Advisors 360, thank you for taking the time to listen today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Dollar Signs, Financial Clarity. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.advisors360pwm.com or give us a call at 408-778-8280. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Advisors 360. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.